Thank you. For the last 25 years, I've worked with women all over the world. Women like Gertrude from the Congo, who was held as a sex slave for a year and a half, who saw her daughter raped in front of her own eyes, who was so badly scarred that it took months to heal her body. She found the courage within herself to heal and to rebuild her life. She is now speaking out against violence. Women like Fatuma from Rwanda, who was raped and had her unborn baby cut out of her womb. She is now helping and inspiring other women in her community. Women who have experienced unspeakable things, who have experienced real and profound fear, who have been raped and violated, ignored and mutilated. How do they recover? How do they find their fears? The fears that is the power within all of us, the very essence of who we are, that which moves us deeply. From these incredible women, I have learned how to nurture my fears, my power, and do that in the face of fear. When I was 14, I moved with my family to Venezuela. And I remember landing in Caracas and leaving the air-conditioned airport building, and the heat hits you in the face. And in that same way, the poverty and inequality in that country hit me profoundly and ignited a spark within me that is now a blazing fire, a burning passion for equality. This passion for equality was fueled as we were driving up to Caracas. I saw the shanty towns where thousands of people live in makeshift houses. But also the wealth, the country club, the mansions, the swimming pools. I could not believe it. The contrast was so shocking. This disbelief continued as I became more familiar with living in Venezuela. I realized how widespread the inequality is and how it affects everyone. But women disproportionately. 70% of the poorest in the world are women. I remember Gladys, a woman who worked for my parents. She had 4 children from 4 different fathers, none of who stayed. She had a hard life, and I remember my urge of wanting to take her arm and tell her, you don't have to be used and abused in that way. At the same time, this inequality based on your gender, just because you are born a woman, was also playing out in my own life. I remember sitting at the dining room table with my family, and my father would say to me, Brita, go and help your mum tidy the table, whilst he and my brother were just sitting there. I mean, I was 14 and I didn't know anything about feminism at the time, but I definitely knew that that was not fair. So there was a lot that I was seeing and experiencing that was fueling my passion for equality. And I knew I had to do something. But what? For me, it was about making sense of it first, understanding what was going on, and then seeing what I could do. I mean, I didn't realize that in the same way that I'm telling you now, right? I mean, I didn't have a plan. I had this burning passion, but I also had a lot of fear. I think I had a lot of fear because I instinctively knew that whatever I was going to do was going to involve moving away from the norm, because I saw the norm as creating the inequality. Moving away from the norm also made sense because I did not feel normal. I've been this tall since I was 13. I was as passionate then as I am now. I spoke fast and excitedly. All in all, I was too tall, too loud, too difficult. I didn't fit in. I could never get trousers that were long enough. And I just felt I was too much. So I decided to study women's studies, which was then a new, and as you can imagine, often belittled subject. But in class, I had more of a sense of belonging than I have ever had before. And through my studies, I understood the extent of gender inequality across all societies. This really inspired me. The fears of the women that I had studied inspired me. And I knew that I wanted that too. I wanted to follow my passion for equality. This led me to work for the not-for-profit sector, promoting women's rights. I thought that this would be the best way to change the world for women. And it has been that for me. The first 10 years working with women in Africa, Latin America, and Asia were life-changing. I was having a positive impact. I was helping other women to find their fears. I remember early on traveling to Ethiopia, where I was working on a project on female genital mutilation and childhood enforced marriage. And I met Abarash, a young 13-year-old girl. We were standing in a derelict school building in the outskirts of Addis Ababa, and she was telling me her story. How her genitals were cut when she was 3, and how she bled, and how painful it was, and how aged 11, she was forced to marry a 40-year-old man, and how he raped her on a regular basis, and how she escaped. As I was listening to her, I felt such deep sadness, and tears were streaming down my face for her and for all the young girls who've experienced unspeakable things that no one ever should have to. And I had the darkness of the pain was so overwhelming that I had this urge to find a light. And so I said to her, "What are your dreams? What are you hoping for?" And for the first time, her face lit up and she said she wanted to learn English. She wanted to learn English. I could not believe it, that in the midst of this darkness there was a light. And I remember thinking to myself, this is what I am going to do. I am always going to try and find hope, and I'm going to make it my business to invest in that hope. A year later, my colleague visited Avarash, and she was speaking English. And whilst my reality could not be further removed from Avarash's, I also know that there is so much that connects us. Above all, our hope that we can change our lives, that we can fulfill our potential, that we can find our fears. So whilst I was helping other women to find their fears, how was my fears doing? Well, not so great. I was pregnant with my first daughter. I was working for a women's rights organization, and I wanted flexible working. And the answer was no. And I didn't challenge it, because I was scared. I was worried about rocking the boat. And so I kept my fears in check, until I was being bullied. It was hurting and undermining me. I was being bullied by another woman who was also a women's rights advocate. And again, I was too scared to speak up. I kept my fears in check. And I probably would not have done anything if I hadn't realized how this was affecting others around me. I was spreading the fear. I realized that everything I had done to this point, all the work I had done believing in the fierceness of other women, was not enough. I had to believe in my own fears and do this without fear. And so I did. Because I remembered all the women that have inspired me, and I knew that that's what they had done. They had held onto their hope, they believed in themselves, and they gave themselves an opportunity. And there were two things that helped me to take this opportunity. Firstly, I really thought about how I would feel if I didn't speak up. How I would feel about being complicit in a growing culture of fear. Really visualizing the price for not speaking up made my fears smaller and made inaction not an option. Secondly, at that time, I was reading a book by Don Miguel Ruiz called The 4 Agreements. You know, when you read the right book at the right time, this was it for me. I mean, one of the agreements that he talks about is called Be impeccable with your word. Be impeccable with your word. He says that the way you talk to yourself really matters. That was groundbreaking for me. I stopped and I started to listen to myself. It was terrifying. I was hearing that I was blaming myself for the situation that I was in. And I also heard that I was talking to myself in a way that I would never talk to anyone else, not my worst enemy. So I knew that I had to change that voice. And now I know that you can change that voice. You can train kindness to yourself like you train a muscle, and it starts with that voice. And that worked for me. For that moment, I did not feel that I was too loud, too difficult, or too much. I spoke up, and the bullying stopped. When we free ourselves from fears, and we allow ourselves to be fierce, that determines the ripples of our impact in the world. I know it seems so obvious now telling my story in this way, but it's not when you're in the middle of this messy journey and you're angry and fearful. And you want that there's someone else who needs to be responsible, someone else who needs to fix this. It's really hard to realize that there is no one else but you. You are going to have to fix it. That's it. And it has nothing to do with your money, your job title, or your status. The power and responsibility is within you, and it has been there all along. That is what Fatuma, Gertrude, and Abarash have taught me. That when you take your life into your own hands, that the ripples, the change that you create is phenomenal, and it ripples across communities and countries. And it is not that you are changing the world for others. It is that you are inspiring others to change their worlds in turn. So I always remember that wherever we have hope, there is the potential to turn fears to fierce. Thank you.